We are now going to go on to our expert future of strategy panel that we have with us. And over the next 30 minutes, I'll be speaking with Matias, Jack, and Matt about how strategy is changing, what organizations are struggling with, and what leaders need to do differently if they want strategy to move beyond planning and actually into execution. I would encourage you to use the Q&A. I can see that here, so I'll be able to pick that up as we go along. Don't wait until the end. If there's something that you would like to ask, put it in there, and then we can pick those questions up. So I'm just going to briefly introduce the panel, who you can all see now on cameras as well. We're joined by Jack Soos. He is the Executive Director of Transformation at Pratt and Whitney. Jack brings the perspective of leading transformation in major industrial environment where strategy has to become measurable, operational, and are really at scale. We also have with us Matias Rajkay from Wargitsch. Some of you may have joined Matias earlier in his strategy execution in practice breakout session. That was very interesting. Thank you, Matias. Bring a very practical transformation engineering view of how strategy transforms actually the land inside an organization. And finally, we have Matt Fleming, Head of Solution Consulting at i-nexus. Matt works closely with organizations that are trying to move from a fragmented planning and reporting into a structured strategy delivery. So thank you for joining us. Just check that all your mics are on.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to open with an obvious question. So when you hear the phrase, the future of strategy, what is the major shift that you think of from organizations and what organizations need to recognize when they're thinking of the future of strategy? And I'm going to start off with, I'm going to point that question at you, Jack, to start with, but I'd love to hear from all three of you. Jack, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. First, Simon, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you well. I can hear you well.
Perfect. It's a big question. I'll share sort of my perspective from my seat here at Pratt Whitney. We operate in the aerospace and defense industry. So Simon, like you said, very capitally intensive global business. But I think for me, the easy go-to is, strategic planning, execution, monitoring. Execution is becoming increasingly digital. So making sure that teams and organizations and enterprises have access to digital solutions to help them gather information quickly, leveraging AI at scale where possible. Those are all things that we're thinking about, but slightly different lens. When I think about the future of strategy, I think about the continued volatility and uncertainty of the global space and the geopolitical space that so many companies operate in. And so I think this has always been true, but will be increasingly more important as companies and organizations develop their strategies and their execution plans, staying in tune with the macro environment that exists outside and how that may affect them internally is just going to be more and more important.
Very good. Very, very true, Jack. Indeed. Absolutely massive topic, as you said. And Matias, what are your thoughts when you hear future strategy?
Well, I think I can sign everything that was said by Jack, but I think there's another factor which is increasingly impacting strategic planning. Besides the uncertainties, I think it's the speed of changes and the executional acceleration that we're seeing across many markets. There's two trends going on in parallel in my eyes. One is there is a less and less differentiation by product, differentiation by services you're offering. You're competing in a much tougher environment, basically across all the B2B areas. And at the same time, we have impacts, especially in the, we feel it here in the European Union, of legal and other impacts on going on GDPR and so on and so forth, which may impact your strategies from outside. In fact, I'm in a project at the moment where we see that as one of the major impact factors, where obviously as a company, you have to deal with those things without really having control over them. So I think uncertainty and acceleration are the two key issues at the moment.
I think, yeah, couldn't agree more. Certainly acceleration, it definitely feels like the world is getting quicker, without a doubt. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I think similar theme. I mean, it's true. I did a history major, so I kind of look back in history, and the world has always been a bewilderingly changing place. I think one aspect of the challenge of our modern world is a little bit maybe more impactful and often overlooked. It's just the amount of information and noise that's available. And I think AI will only exponentially increase the amount of data that's around. Our attention spans have diminished. We expect updates all the time. We're used to scrolling now. And so if you're a leader laying out your strategy, it's almost no longer good enough to report on every quarter. You're expected to be always on and responding to it and continuously adapting your story based on the data that's around you. And I guess frustratingly, if you're an expert in aerospace, Jack, or whatever else you do, AI really democratizes that. So no longer are you the only person that really understands the potential impacts of things that are happening. AI can help investors and others who have no insider knowledge of your industry get to those difficult questions and impacts much more quickly. So I think there's a lot more pressure on organizations to constantly keep their strategy current and keep their organization's attention on message and deal with that noise around them.
No, I think there's some definite themes there. Accelerated world, pressure, fast world we're living in. So, no, fantastic, Matt. I'm going to move to another question for you. I'm going to start with you on this one, Jack, specifically for you. From your perspective in a major industrial environment, and what are those biggest barriers you see from turning strategy into actual measurable execution? What is it that you see there?
It's a great question, Simon. I'll answer that in two ways. One, I've been with Pratt Whitney a total of about 15 years. So I did leave for a couple years and joined Starbucks corporate, also playing a role in their strategy and business operations discipline. And I would say big industrials can learn a lot from other industries as far as speed and scale of innovation. So I'll just put that up front. But one of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind in the large industrial sector, high technology, aerospace defense, anything that requires high capital resources to execute on a plan, is consistency in direction as much as possible. So when you're building a factory or installing a large piece of capital equipment that might have years or multi-year lead times, you need to make sure the direction you're headed in as a business is the right one. And you don't have the luxury of pivoting very often. And so that makes the upfront planning process that much more important. And to Matt's point, leveraging tools like AI and learning models that we're deploying here sort of democratizes access to information and ultimately, hopefully, makes decisions smarter, more consistent, and more aligned with the long-term direction of the business. And so, I think it's true in any enterprise. Capital is a constraint on strategy. You have limited resources and usually want to do a lot more than what those resources can do for you. So that makes smarter use of those even more important. And in large industrials, that's even more critical because of the sunk cost of some of the large investments we have to make to serve our customers.
Yeah, that's a great response, Jack. Consistency, yes, across all points, not just staying consistent in what you're doing, but consistent in your approach and the way that leadership actually align the organization. That's very good, very, very interesting. Matias, I have a question for you. So working with organizations in transformation on strategy execution, as in your presentation, you've done this for many, many years, you've seen a lot. So what patterns do you see across companies that struggle to make it stick?
I think there's two major factors that are widely spread issues that need to be looked at. One is coping with external changes in time. So something happens somewhere, it's a small butterfly in Australia that creates the big what do you call them, tornado in on the other side of the world. I think that if you are not sensitive enough to cope with the small changes in time and understand their impact, that's one risk you're running to neglect those in your big strategy, and you end up being too proud of yourself and what you're doing. And I think there's enough industry examples. Take Kodak is very often used. Sitting digital photography is not something we need to care about. We've got good films. So that's that type of issue. The second thing is, and I've seen this unfortunately very often in multinational areas, is that something is very well defined and thought out, but not taking into consideration the international impact or the cultural dimensions it has in other areas of the world. So you define a strategy, implement it, and it works perfectly well for the small area that the management is located in your home country, but it's a catastrophe for the other markets. And it's a lot of money that is being burnt that way because it's simply inefficient. And those are those things that practically happen in my eyes very too often.
Interesting. So is that because organizations are kind of overcomplicating what they're doing there, or are they oversimplifying it? Because if you've got these small changes that you've got to consider, what is it that they're doing there to make sure they cover that?
Let me give you a very short example of one of the things. When I worked at Compaq, we defined a strategy and rolled it out for Eastern Europe. And I was fortunate enough to be the country general manager for a small country called Hungary. We were doing well. We hit about 50% market share of the branded computers, which I don't think is too bad after 3 years of presence. And we were forced to use a marketing agency called Ogilvy & Mather. Now, the budget I received for executing my marketing strategy would barely finance Ogilvy's monthly fee. So I got no money left for executing something. With 50% revenue share or market share already, there was not a chance that I could increase my marketing money. So I ended up with a tool that was inadequate for my market. Luckily, we were able to dispute this, and we went with local agencies. But it's this type of, getting the wrong perspective on partial markets. It doesn't have to be a geographical market. It can be a market segment. It can be a certain product range, whatever. But it's the complexity is increasing, and keeping all those things in line is certainly a challenge.
That's a great practical example. Thank you, Matias. So, Matt, I've got a question for you then. I'll follow on with you next. So you work closely, as I know, with organizations, really trying to move them from a fragmented sort of planning into a structured execution system. And what is it that you find customers are asking for now that perhaps they weren't asking for 5 or 10 years ago? And that might give us a clue into where it's heading. So what do you see they're asking for now? What's changed?
So I think at a macro level, I'm not sure anything's changed too much. I'd describe our typical customer as they're looking to engage the organization in the strategy. They want to get better at delivering the outcomes of the strategy. And there's always, and maybe it's partly our lean background, but there's always been a very big desire to get transparency and to coach people through the organization to kind of improve the decision making and the problem solving on the ground. And I think all of those things remain as true today as they ever did. Lots has happened in the last 10 years, particularly in manufacturing, supply chain shocks all over the place, COVID, geopolitical changes, China's rise, the technology. We've had SaaS really take off, then low code, and now AI. But I think those three things broadly are the same. The main changes are that I think thinking and planning cycles have got more urgent and perhaps a little bit more mature. We expect delivery faster. We expect information, to my point before, a lot faster. We've had the whole revolution towards business agile to varying degrees of success depending on the industry. So I think broadly our clients used to want to build a business system and take their time to get that system right for the organization. And I think the change cycle is that much faster now. They're much more expecting a system that's almost ready to go, something that already works that they can recognize. And that's not just the mechanics of the software, it's also the philosophy of the software and what kind of things it emphasizes and how it supports decision making and problem solving. Simpler ways of getting data in, more automation, more connectivity, and more informal. They want transparency, but a lot less formal process than we used to see. People don't want to take 6 months to design that because they know it's going to change very quickly. It's not going to last 5 years in their recent experience. They're wanting things that can be a little bit more off the shelf and a lot more adaptable, and do some of that thinking for them.
That makes a lot of sense. So do you think that it's a case of customers are becoming more mature, or the organizations are becoming more mature about how they think about strategy, or is it more just the world's evolving around them, so they're having to change with how they work?
I think our expectations of how much work the system does for us have changed. Systems have got much more user-friendly, much more intelligent, and so people expect a lot more of that thinking done and on a plate. Whereas perhaps our users 10 years ago might have been more really interested in how the system worked and what the possibilities were and how they could configure it differently for themselves. And I think now a lot of the time they want to find something that really fits a process. And the IT industry as a whole, and with exposure to SaaS, has got really good at solving specific problems. So people have a high expectation that a software they buy is going to solve that problem, and it'll be more than just buttons. It'll be something that really speaks to what they're trying to achieve.
That makes sense. I think I agree with you on that, definitely, Matt. Okay, so I've got a question for all three of you, and I'll pick an order, but I would like to imagine an organization that they're simply saying that they want their strategy to be more executable over the next 12 months. That's their kind of problem statement. So what would be the one thing that you would tell them to change first, to go and look at first? And I'll start with you, Matias. What would you offer them as some wise words of wisdom?
Well, it always depends, I would say. But I think one of the basic elements that is always worth looking at is really the KPI architecture of how things come together. So has the strategy been defined on the basis of reasonable KPIs that really reflect the right picture? And it's not only, a theoretical something that is not matching reality. And looking at those things goes along with looking at the processes that are in place. I sometimes use the analogy of if you're a landscape architect and you design a park and you put your trees and your flowers and your bushes everywhere and make nice gravel ways, for people to stroll around. If you go and revisit that place 2 years later, you'll find lots of, small tracks in the dirt that people were walking offside those roads that you have planned, and that's the reality. So one was the design, one is the reality. Is your KPI system incapable of capturing those things? If not, make sure that you've got the right KPI system in place before embarking on putting in transformation or new strategies. And keep your KPI system flexible, obviously.
That's great, Matias. I always love your analogies. Thank you very much. That's great. And then to come to you, Matt, what are your thoughts? What would be that one thing you would say?
Just one. I'm going to be super old-fashioned. I mean, I see a lot of strategies day to day, Simon. We talk to a lot of clients, so I get to see under NDA, so no revelations today. But I think frequently we see clients with lots of stuff that they're doing, but the quality of the objectives and what they're really trying to achieve is often still almost assumed and in heads and not really written out. So one thing most organizations could do, based on my experience, is just get super smart about your objectives. What is the current state? What is the target state you're aiming at? And start talking about outcomes rather than just delivery progress.
Wise words, Matt. Thank you. And yourself, Jack, what would be that one thing?
If I had to choose one to make strategy more executable over the next 12 months, it would be to very early in planning partner with the digital technology teams and organizations in the enterprise. Typically, I shouldn't say typically, what we see sometimes is digital engagement pulled in too late, and that tends to drive schedule latency. And there are very few things that we see as far as large enterprise targets that do not require some sort of digital thread to execute. And so making sure that those teams are engaged upfront in the planning process, in the cost benefit analysis, in the resourcing planning is really, really important. And I think the way to do that is through really strong partnerships internally or externally, depending on who your service providers are, and potentially looking at existing traditional organizational designs and moving technical talent into areas of the business that need to execute.
Oh, that's great, Jack. Anything, Jack, just a quick one for you that you'd say stop doing?
Half of your improvement targets, maybe. No, I think the stops for me are not necessarily hard stops. It's more about allocating level of effort and energy differently. And I think this is a challenge for a lot of organizations. There is so much like interest and effort and energy spent in planning, which is all important. It's really important. That by the time you get to execute, there's a level of fatigue in the organization. And I think whatever organizations can do, and technology does help with this, and getting back to some of the basics, like Matt said, can help as well. But whatever organizations can do to shift the energy to execution, not totally away from planning, but like rebalance that a little bit, I think that'll go a long way and make planning even easier the next year, because oftentimes you look at a plan for an improvement target or key initiative, and you question, did we ever get what we said we were going to do last year done? And I think some of that's organizational fatigue coming out of the planning cycle into execution. So not a stop, but maybe a slight shift in energy.
That's great. No, very good. I think, Jack, you mentioned technology and you mentioned moving into, using digital teams. And I think that brings on to one of my final questions before we go into Q&A. We've got quite a lot of questions come through. So in fact, AI, I couldn't avoid a conversation about the future strategy and AI. So it obviously enters almost absolutely every business conversation. So I guess in strategy, where do you think AI will genuinely improve the way organizations are deciding and the way they're executing and they're learning? And, or do you think there's an awful lot of hype around it going on? Or what do you think the reality of the situation is where we stand today? And I'm going to start with you on this one, Matt. I'll ask you to go first. You can start off this hot topic.
Well, I think it raises the stakes, but I think it it levels the playing field, but it doesn't change the top end, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I'm going to dumb AI's impact down a lot by just comparing it for a moment to something much simpler like spell check. If you can't spell, spell check's revolutionary. Suddenly you can work at the same speed as everybody else, right? And suddenly not worry about that thing. I think AI has a similar effect. It brings everybody up a level. I think the opportunity is that bad strategy shouldn't be out there anymore, because AI is going to be a bit of a guardrail against that. It's going to get you the basics taken care of. It's going to point out the obvious flaws. It's going to do those things. I think the jury's out a little bit more on whether it can really take you forward in more of a creative and innovative way. I don't know if we got onto the risks of this yet, Simon, but there's a if you get into AI deciding your strategy, I noticed Argentina this week talking about making it legally possible for AIs to be CEOs of companies and not to have human responsibility for that. We don't know how that will go on the more creative and innovative front. And I think there is a genericization risk that AIs are great at processing what's already there, but it'll be interesting to see whether they can really help us with the entrepreneurial, the innovative, and the creative things that would truly set your company apart, or whether they'll sort of level everybody down to be effectively the same company in the end. So just some of the thoughts. I also, just to say, I worry because AI is doing wonderful things for us at the moment, but I think all of us on this call probably knew what it was doing. We had to do that job before AI existed, right? So we can see what it's driving at. We know roughly what it's approaching. We know what material it might be referencing even. The next generation is going to be fascinating. Without that sort of experience of what AI is actually doing pre-AI, how our organizations evolve and where humans end up in that, I think is going to be really interesting. And I wonder whether organizations that succeed are going to keep people fairly front and center to this and not get too carried away with it.
So a cautionary note I hear there, Matt. Thank you very much. It's I like the spelling analogy. That's a good way to think about it. Jack, what are your thoughts on this? Is it going to improve the way organizations are deciding and executing?
Well, Simon, this is actually AI right here. Real Jack is at the pub getting ready for Switzerland, Canada in a couple hours. But no, I think
Brilliant.
I think it has to. I think it has to improve. I agree with Matt. There are some risks associated. I think organizations that sort of put all of their trust in a model like that are putting themselves at a degree of risk. Where we see it having a pivotal role is in some of the tasks associated with robust planning processes. So when it gets to, filtering data, pulling insights from information, coalescing data sets like that, those are things that, AI or agents can really help expedite to give more time back to employees to think creatively, problem solve, et cetera. But for us, in our journey, we rely on that human interface with digital support, digital solutions to make sure the business is making the right decisions. And we leverage a number of different AI tools, but one of the analogies I love is one of the tools we use is Copilot, which is a great tool for the Microsoft suite, but we make sure our employees understand it's a co-pilot, not an autopilot for our business. And that tends to stick, and that's sort of our mentality right now.
I know I will be using that very soon. It's co-pilot, not autopilot. I like that a lot. Thank you, Jack. And then finally, Matias, what are your thoughts about AI and what organizations are trying to do with strategy?
I think a lot of it has already been said, and I think one should always keep in mind that AI is strong if it has a strong basis of data that it can work on and to extract any assumptions out of there. So in other words, when you're looking at linear processes, improving those and developing those further, AI can be a great asset. Where I think there is a risk is when it comes to disruptive situations. When something unexpected happens that did not happen in the past, AI will not be able to, put it at the right weight. And if we look at the industries going on at the moment, we have a lot of that disruption going on. Take automotive with the e-cars versus the good old gas cars. Look at any other things, energy, what's going on in the energy market at the moment. There's a lot of disruption coming from outside that is not foreseeable in your old set of data. So I think that the analogy of autopilot and co-pilot is a very powerful one, in that sense that you need to stay on top of it, you need to control it, and understand when it's going in the wrong direction. Thinking of an AI as a CEO really scares me, because that's a backward, that's calls to me, it looks to me like a backward oriented way of managing a system, and that's not a good way. I don't drive my car looking in the rearview mirror, and that's, I think, one of those analogies there.
No, I think that's very good. I mean, yeah, we do need to stay on top of it. Absolutely, we do. I think so. We have a number of questions. So thank you everybody for joining in on those questions. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go through the questions, and I will skillfully try to work out which ones perhaps I could point at each of you. And obviously, I've got a bit of a time limit on it as well. So I'm going to go with the first one. So, is the problem that companies have too many priorities, or that they lack the courage to kill weak ones? Matias, I can see you on the screen at the moment. I'll go for you. What are your thoughts on that question?
A very good one. I think that goes down to the point of, setting your priorities right. That means if you're working on your strategy, look at your milestones, look at your quality gates, and sort out what you don't need. So concentrate on the important things. That doesn't mean that the other things are not important, shouldn't be done, but they don't have the same importance. And I'm talking there about resources, funding, and these things. Make sure you put your resources in the right basket, and don't lose sight of the real important things when you've got too many things on the plate.
That's a good response. I think I'm going to move through these quickly. So this one, I'm going to go for you, Jack. Do leaders, teams, do leadership teams mistake alignment for agreement? Do you see that often?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think sometimes those two words can be mistaken. I think the goal is alignment always. There can be disagreement, and disagreement respectfully is powerful amongst teams, and not just leaders, but all teams. And so I think alignment is the objective, not necessarily always agreement. But yeah, I think sometimes there's a desire to agree because it feels good. But what's really important for the enterprise is alignment around the most important things to do.
And do you think that people think they're actually aligning on things, but the more it's just that they're actually just agreeing? Perhaps there's a slight difference, isn't there? It's like...
There is. Sometimes it really the measure of that is in what gets executed out of the room.
Yes.
Not in the
yes.
room. So that's why I say like alignment is key. I'd rather have a team exit understanding the direction, but maybe not fully agreeing with one another, versus agreeing with each other in the room and then going and doing different things.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I'm going to go to one around, it looks at around frameworks actually. Are OKRs, Hoshin, balanced scorecards, and similar frameworks helping organizations execute better, or are they often becoming theatre? I'm going to go with you, Matt, to start with on that one. I know you talk a lot about these topics.
Are they becoming theatre? They can be. It's all down to, I think with all of these tools, they're just tools, and it's how they're used in the organization that becomes really key, whether they're really followed up, whether they're pushed. They each have different strengths. I think we see stakeholders come into our customer organizations and change them from Hoshin to OKRs, or change them back to, I'm a bit agnostic with this. I just think strategy comes down to logical thinking around what are we trying to achieve, how will we measure the target state, and what will we do to get there. And those different tools visualize that in different ways, but they broadly achieve the same end. And I think, no, each of them can be super valuable, and each of them can also be theatre. The only consistent issue I have with Hoshin can become over complex. OKRs can become over performance managey. They can kill collaboration because a lot of organizations take those OKRs in a strategic sense and deploy them in a HR sense. Whereas, Jack, Matias, you need to hit this objective, and that then can kill collaboration and encourage the wrong behaviors that you need for strategy. So that's the only thing I would say. In the wrong hands, they're all theatre, and in the right hands, they're all gold. There you go.
Excellent answer. Thank you, Matt. I'm going to pick one final question. So sorry, don't get to all of them. So with the speed of change in semiconductors and new integrations forced almost real-time adjustment, how is this distilled and managed is critical to prevent whiplash in the workforce? Any recommendations? So I'm going to ask that question to not to all three of you, but who out of the three of you would like to pick that question up? Basically, it's on about the speed of change and how do we prevent any whiplash in the workforce? Are there any recommendations for that? I'm going to pick somebody. Matias.
Yeah, I will.
Just because I can see
I
you.
think my first reaction to this would be that if something unexpected happens and something accelerates faster than I thought, my first reflex would be to look at what dependencies do I have? Where am I burning? Where are the problems? And then do a quick prioritization of, would I need to take action before it really starts hurting? That's the reactive side of it. Mm-hmm. There should be a proactive side of it, which means, okay, my supply chains are changing. Perhaps I need new vendors. I need to find new sources for my materials that I'm buying. All these elements come in, and I have to hopefully I have already a set of processes ongoing that I can engage and utilize to speed up on those movements. If I don't have them, I better create them very fast and try to alleviate the situation. The question about whiplash to the workforce, that's a very cultural one as well, because sometimes it will mean I've been working on moving a factory of a electric component company, the manufacturing site from a high price European country into nearshore in Eastern Europe. And we looked at the employees, and we found employees who were willing to go along and say, hey, that's great. We'll start up a new business and everything is new. We can define things better. That was perhaps 10 or 15% of the employees working in that factory that had to be dissolved. The other 85%, of course, were victims. So I need to deal with them in a social manner, etc. Those are hard facts in the industry. But at the other end, you also find when you go somewhere else, you put down a factory, people there get scared as well. What is it doing to my environment, etc., etc., etc. So you have negatives and positives on both sides. So the whiplash is not only to your employees, it's into the entire system. And I think you have to look at the systemic view in order to look at what this type of external impacts create to do to your business model.
Excellent answer, Matias. Thank you very much. So thank you for all the questions that everybody sent through. We'll probably get responses to the rest of them as well. That will be possible. So thank you very much. Before we close, I have one quick fire round for all three of you. Complete this sentence. The organizations that win in the future will be ones that, and I'm going to start with you, Jack. Organizations that win in the future will be ones that. Are you there? Are you there, Jack? I think Jack might be on mute. I'm going to jump to you, Matt. Matt, organizations in the future that will win will be ones that
understand their value and culture, keep and develop the right people, understand data, and can filter out the noise and focus on what's really important out of that data.
I like it a lot. Thank you. And Matias, organizations that win will be ones that you've got a audio problem there as well. So we are going to have to exit leave the.
I'm on now.
Oh, you're there. You're back. Fantastic. Yes, go on then. Go for it.
So I think organizations will be successful if they're resilient, have an open culture of communication, and are not hampered by too much of hierarchical thinking.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay, and Jack, I can see you're back. Jack?
Okay, hopefully this works. Can you hear me, Simon?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Organizations will be successful if they fully embrace digital technology and AI, but do not become fully reliant on it.
Embrace, not reliant. I love it. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Matias, Jack, and Matt. It's been a really valuable discussion. An awful lot to take from it. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody that submitted questions. It was wonderful to see so many coming through. Excellent points being made. And sorry that we couldn't get to all of them. But to our panelists again, thank you very much for your time. It's excellent.